When people turn to healthcare for weight loss, they're looking for real support. That's why more people are choosing OrderlyMeds.com. Orderly Meds connects you with real doctors and access to proven GLP-1 medications like semaglutide and tirzepatide. No guessing, just a more supportive experience. And all shipped directly to your door in discreet packaging. Do your research. Ask questions. Then visit OrderlyMeds.com/podcast for an exclusive offer. That's OrderlyMeds.com/podcast. Individual results may vary, not medical advice. Eligibility required. See site for details.
It's coming out of you. Bold and blunt. Bold and blunt.
The home ownership crisis. Is it hitting at you or your family? That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Census, the U.S. Census Department, wrote this piece September 11th, 2025, 9/11 last year, entitled, "The Cost of Home Ownership Continues to Rise." And so if you are already a homeowner in America, maybe the financing aspect of buying a home, maybe it's fallen under your radar a bit. But if you have college kids, if you have kids or no kids, or know some young adults who would like to move from the apartment renting into the home buying, apparently, according to statistics, it's getting even more and more difficult. The American dream is becoming out of reach for too many Americans. So what can be done about that? Before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app at Real Life Network. That is the faith-based news outreach of Pastor Jack Hibbs's Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills Church in California. They have great video and audio shows that you can get over there, RLN. Check them out. They give you a faith-based perspective to what's going on in today's world. Politics, culture, geopolitics, all that good stuff. You may also get Bold and Blunt at WashingtonTimes.com, where if you scroll to the bottom of the webpage and find the newsletter section, click on it and sign up for the Best of Cheryl Chumley. You'll get my newsletter delivered right to your email box Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It contains my commentaries as well as my audio Bold and Blunts and my video Bold and Blunts, which just underwent this really cool redesign. I've got a new intro for my video version of Bold and Blunt with a new intro for the audio version coming soon. So check that out. It's really great. And make sure you give your feedback on it, because I'd love to pass that along to the production team at the Washington Times. They are among the best in the business. I'd like to also say you may also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. It's only a Google search away, and you can get my show. All right, let me go back to this census piece about the cost of home ownership continues to rise. I want to read from this just a little bit, because these are government stats, right, based on census stats. The median monthly owner costs for U.S. homeowners with a mortgage increased to $2,035 in 2024, up from $1,960 in 2023. That's according to the most recent American Community Survey, ACS, from the U.S. Census Bureau. So look at these stats, and some of them are significant if you're trying to move into the home ownership market. Median monthly owner costs increased 3.8% from 2023 to 2024, more than the increase of 3% from 2022 to 2023. This increase was primarily driven by higher mortgage costs and insurance fees. Yeah, insurance is getting outrageous, I got to tell you that. All right, among states and the District of Columbia, homeowners with a mortgage in California Hawaii, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and the District of Columbia had the highest median monthly costs. Highest median monthly costs for their mortgage. All right, let's run down the figures. California, it was $3,001 median cost. Hawaii, $2,937. New Jersey, $2,797. Massachusetts, $2,755. And the District of Columbia, $3,181. More than half of owned homes, or 59.7%, had a monthly mortgage payment in 2024. The number of homes owned free and clear, meaning without a monthly mortgage payment, climbed as well. There were about 900,000 more owned homes paid off in 2024 than in 2023. And if you break that down into the numbers of homes, it's 35 million homes paid off in 2024 compared to 34.1 million homes in 2023. All right, all very good, all very interesting. Let's bump over to HUD, Housing and Urban Development, another federal site, a history of the rise of home ownership in the United States. So, according to HUD, home ownership is chugging along at a decent rate. Reading from this piece, owner occupancy is the most common form of housing tenure in the United States. In the final fiscal quarter of 2024, so this is a recent article, recent stats, the home ownership rate stood at nearly 66%. So as you go through the history of home ownership in America, which I'm not going to, the 1920s, they take you through the Great Depression and World War II. To me, what's most interesting, the past half century. So from 1970 up through today, this is what HUD is finding. User-friendly mortgage products came into being around 1970, along with a stable financial system and based on decades of post-war prosperity. Those are the things that drove home ownership in the 1970s. Okay, so during the 1970s and 1980s, persistent inflation caused mortgage rates to rise, which priced some families out of home ownership and caused the home ownership rate to decrease slightly in the 1980s. However, that rate of home ownership rose again in the 1990s and early 2000s from 63.8% of home ownership in 1989 to a record high of 69.2% in 2004. That's interesting. Almost 70% of American families owned their home in 2004. And we're talking about detached single family structures here. Yet, today's home ownership figures, according to some data from American Enterprise Institute, some data from the AFPI, America First Policy Institute, show that home ownership, the ability of youth to buy a home, the ability of Americans, especially youth, to take part in that American dream of buying a home, right? Raising a family, the white picket fence and two-car family, the traditional American dream. It's out of reach. The youth are being tossed to the side of the home ownership dream and forced up until their late 30s, right? Even entering into their 40s to rent. So my guest today, Michael Burkentine, he's not only a home builder on the front lines of seeing and experiencing the pricing of the home buying market, but he's also a partner with the America First Policy Institute's Make Housing Great Again initiative. And in so doing, does a lot of work with the Trump administration on how to do just that, right? How to bring the American dream back to America, back to particularly the youth in America who have been kept out of the home buying market due to a variety of factors. So, Michael Berkentine, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It is great to have you here.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you are a home builder, but you also partner with the America First Policies Institute. And I want to talk to you about making housing great again, because home building, it seems, is imperiled in America. What's going on there?
Yeah, so AFPI, Benny Johnson, Dr. Carson, and I partnered up to do a focus on trying to bring to light what things we could do with policy from a federal level and state and local for that matter, and take things to the next level. Cheryl, we're dealing with an issue in America from an affordability issue. And, we being in the real estate business, we're seeing families, being forced to rent homes instead of buy them. We're in both parts of that industry, so we get to see, both sides of it. And really, what we need to be focused on is trying to get deregulation intact, and we actually have policies that are working from a local standpoint. I actually work with AEI a lot on these types of things, and so we're just trying to talk with the White House, talk with Congress, talk with Senate, and get the right things in motion to help better the ability for young people to buy homes in America.
When you say AEI, that's American Enterprise Institute, a think tank, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we work with Ed Pinto over there, one of the senior fellows.
So let's talk generically about homeownership first. Why is that good for America? Why is that good for potential home buyers? And just to throw out a devil's advocate question, is it possible that more people are renting out of choice?
We always talk about the American dream, and what's better than getting out of college, graduating high school, getting into the workforce, creating a family, having kids, having babies, getting married, and instead of taking them to your dorm room or your apartment, you have the ability to buy a small single family home that's affordable. That is what we call the American dream, and it is, been really difficult to achieve here as of late. The first-time home buyer age has been 40 years old. That is an issue. So when it comes to being forced to decide when you get out of college as a young person, let's say, you're forced to rent right now. Even buying a townhome has been difficult, and we're seeing prices rise from a land development standpoint. So that means putting the streets and roads and curbs in. Those prices are inflating like crazy. And even land cost itself, we're seeing those numbers go through the roof, which all of these things affect the cost basis, which then pass on to the future homeowner. The days of, being able to get out as a young person, start a family, they're super limited right now. So we have to really come together and focus on what policies are going to drive the bus to get us back to what I call the olden days.
This seems a very complex issue, and we've been seeing in the news the last year or so about corporations buying up homes, private homes, and then in turn renting them to, what would have been potential homeowners themselves. And President Trump has spoken about that issue. What can you tell us what's going on there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's been really a big talk on the Hill right now because, as you know, the 21st Century Act has passed through the Senate and is now in Congress. And there is a lot of pushback from the what they call build to rent folks, which includes some of us from our company. And basically, what the president is intending to happen from his executive order is let's keep Wall Street out of our neighborhoods that we have home buyers. So, for example, if you and I own a house and we're neighbors, but the house next door to you comes up for sale, and let's say Blackstone bids on it, and they bid it up $45,000 over asking. That is what the president is honed in on. We should not allow large financial institutions like that to come in and mess up our family neighborhoods. And right now what's happening is a lot of language that has been very under extreme scrutiny relative to Section 901 in this new bill, which puts a lot of pressure on the build to rent community as a whole. There's a lot of unanswered questions, which in turn could really hurt supply of housing, driving prices even higher. See, Cheryl, this whole entire thing that we're dealing with, from being able to buy a house, yes, groceries are a little higher. Yes, we're at war and we have oil issues, but the core fundamental of what we're trying to solve for is around getting the pricing down for housing, right? And getting it right-sided for Americans to buy the house, live the American dream, and take it to the next level.
Can you walk back in time a little bit? Is there a decade or even a couple years time span where this trend of unaffordability for home buyers, for new home buyers, really started to take root in America? Because it didn't used to be that way, of course.
COVID was the transformational, pivotal time in the building industry. And I remember it like it was yesterday, because I had known numbers personally like the back of my hand. And as we went through COVID, I lost track of where pricing truly was. And it was so upsetting and disruptive to, getting deals done and pricing houses out quickly and getting your feet on the ground, because you could price a house during those times today on May 5th, but then all of a sudden, by the time we got to the house, the prices had risen 10% more, and then we're taking it on the chin. So then we were overpricing houses to try to compensate. And that trend, what's called price stepping, basically became the new normal, because even if, let's say, plumbing fixtures came down in cost, the plumber wasn't passing along those savings because they themselves had issues, and they're trying to recoup profits that were lost because of we'll call it mismanagement of budget due to the circumstances. So it's really been this domino effect since COVID that has just continued on and on and on.
Okay, I got to say, you really surprised me by pinpointing that moment in time. I thought you were going to say something like the 1980s, early 1990s. We started seeing home prices soar, outpacing inflation, outpacing revenues and things like that. But it's COVID that's to blame?
Yeah, I mean, that's to me, that's the typical economist answer, what you just said. From a boots on the ground standpoint, we're building 1,000 homes a year. That is my honest opinion of what I've seen in terms of the answer as to why or when did this really start to take course. And there was a lot of mismanagement during that time, post-COVID, from a sense of what we had to do and government affairs, and it's really a difficult time.
So where's where's the breakdown now? Is it that contractors are unwilling to reel back prices because now that the supply chains for their products are more stable, they don't want to give up on that extra revenue, or they're trying to recoup lost revenues from the COVID year?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture. If you go and you ask any trade in the construction industry right now, are you making the profits that you need to make? Majority of them will answer no. And that is because we continue to see costs inflate. I was just talking to our estimating department last week, and we're seeing 8% here, 10% there, 3% there. And the letters keep coming in on, hey, the tariffs have pushed this up, or whatever the excuse is. And it's been difficult from that standpoint. So I don't think that trades are being greedy. I think people are trying to survive.
Let's talk about a little bit about the border control policies, the previous open border policies under Joe Biden, and the current closed border policies or secure border policies under President Donald Trump. There have been statistics and reports and surveys that showed, by and large, the home building industry is dominated by illegal immigrants. And I wonder if you can speak to how that has impacted housing.
Yeah, the illegal immigrants topic is twofold. One, from an inventory standpoint, naturally, economics 101, if you bring more people into the country, they need a place to live, thus taking away housing from American citizens, which disrupts the marketplace. That cannot be disputed. That is just basic economics. Now, how much has that affected supply? That's kind of to be determined, because an illegal immigrant is not able to afford a single family home. Typically they're going into apartments or small townhomes and so forth. The second part of the illegals that I'd like to touch on from the workforce standpoint, that has been very interesting to be a part of and watch. A lot of our homes that are being built around America are by Spanish, Guatemalan, South American folks, and they're hard workers. A lot of them do a great job. Some don't, but that's the same in any ethnicity that's in the trades and doing work. But, we have to just watch. We need to make sure the bad guys are not here, but we also need to just pay attention and monitor our workforce and making sure, because the less the workforce, the higher the prices. And that's, to go back to your quote, it is a complex equation. This is an algorithm. This is a differential equation that is not normal. And I think that's why the federal government has been slow to solve it, because it is so difficult to really wrap your head around.
So let's finish with some solutions, because it's interesting that the federal government is slow to resolve this, because what you described, this all soaring under COVID, it seems like if the problem came into being so quickly, then that actually is a little bit optimistic to solve the problem, because it means it could be solved quickly. What kind of suggestions would you say that the federal, state, local governments need to take right now to reel back the housing crisis?
Well, I work with the White House a lot on this topic, and I feel the administration's done a great job in terms of rolling out the blueprint as to what we need to do. But to AEI's standpoint, I was talking with Ed Pinto the other day. This is definitely a state and local level resolution, and states need to fight. And we're already starting to see it. There's an actual tracker, and I can send it to you. There's a tracker that AEI has to show which states have implemented some of the what's called playbooks that AEI has came out with that are based on statistics. For example, zoning reform is much needed in our country, because we have for decades gotten to this culture of larger lots, which increases the cost basis to a home buyer. So what we've been trying to do is lower that cost basis by zoning reform. So we're tracking that, and a lot of states are starting to really adopt some of these things. So the federal government, I'm encouraging them to try to push from the White House, hey, let's do some of these things that we're seeing and advocate for it, socialize it, and stand behind it.
And the environmentalist angle, because I know local zoning and planning departments take into consideration, depending on the location, depending on what community we're talking about, they take into consideration quite a bit the environmentalists and the pushback from some of the radical environmentalists that just want no growth. So are you seeing an easing of that under this administration?
Yeah, I mean, from a state and local level, you're always going to have NIMBYism, which is not in my backyard acronym. And you're never going to truly get away from that. You know, we're seeing that in the entitlement process, which is the process that you go into your townships, you go into municipalities, you're asking for approvals. Even if it's used by right, you still have folks that have a home that's next to the new community that's proposed, and they don't want to have that in their backyard. And so you'll never get around that. And I kind of attribute that to the environmentalists, because there's some folks that are in that realm. But to answer your question pointedly, the environmentalist piece has certainly eased with this administration. The EPA has relaxed things. The Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, has relaxed things. They've also increased the speed at which we get our permits, which has been huge, because sometimes when you go and you start a community, it can take a long, long time to get what's called an NPDES permit. And we are fast tracking that. For example, we have Senator Kristen Phillips Hill that had put a program in called SPEED in Pennsylvania that's making big differences. And we're seeing that in other states take place.
Michael Berkentine, this was a very interesting discussion. I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
What an interesting discussion. Very important to peel back the layers of what's going on instead of just taking the headline news, right? That the economy's bad, we need more money thrown at the housing issue. I hope that gave you some interesting insights. It did to me. I want to thank you for listening and remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.